Hi, I'm Carrie and welcome to my studio. I'm going to be sharing about all of the knitting projects I've gotten up to over the last month or so. And June was a little bit of a weird month for me. It's currently the beginning of July. I ended up with a week off of work that I was not expecting, and you would have thought that I would have gotten a ton of knitting done during this unexpected week off, but instead I got a lot of gardening done. So I'll be sure to put in a little bit of footage of what I got up to in my garden. I put in a whole new front garden bed during this time off, and that was really lovely, but also really labor intensive. So that kind of took up my focus during that week off. It was unseasonably cool. We were getting a lot of rain. So I'm like, this is the only time that I'm ever going to have an opportunity to do this kind of project. So that's kind of what I did during that extra week. I still have been knitting, of course, and I am really excited to share with you today one finished object, two works in progress, including one new cast on. So I'll briefly start off with what I'm wearing here. This is my knot front crop. This is worked in Valley Yarns Charlemont in, I believe, the olive color. And I knit this in, I think, 2019. So it's been a number of years at this point. And this pattern just has a nice little knot detail at the center. So this is the bottom of the garment, and like this is where my belly button is. So it's definitely something that I'm pretty much mostly wearing over dresses. Sometimes I'll wear it with like high-waisted pants or a high-waisted skirt or something like that, but for the most part, just for like coverage purposes, I'm wearing it over a dress. It is a really cute topper over a dress, so this is my preferred way to wear it. And since it's kind of hot, I'm mostly wearing sleeveless garments, so this is kind of the perfect thing to add a little bit of knitwear into my wardrobe without getting overwhelmingly hot. I'll get started with my one finished object. This is Oakhaven Tee. I worked this up in Purl Soho Oleander in the bay leaf color, and I used US 3 needles. I knit the size 40, and I ended up approximately at gauge. It's maybe a little bit off, like 1/2 inch to 1 inch total circumference in terms of my finished garment dimensions, and I honestly love this top so much. So Oleander is a 50% cotton, 50% linen blend, and I toss this in the washer and dryer to essentially block my garment, and I absolutely love the finished fabric of it. I will say the fabric definitely like shrinks up in the wash, so there's definitely a difference in the fabric of when you're like knitting the fabric and then putting it in the washer and dryer. Everything kind of like snugs up a little bit. That being said, you can kind of stretch things out after they've come out of the wash. Don't be alarmed at the immediately out of the dryer appearance or size of a garment, because you can kind of just tug on the fabric, and that just gives the effect of like having worn the garment for a couple of hours, because the thing about cotton and linen, or really just cellulose fibers that don't have a lot of elasticity, is that yes, they can shrink up in the dryer and stuff, but once they get stretched back out, they're not going to spring back into shape. They're just going to like stay the size that you stretch them out to. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. You may be like, oh no, this shrunk up a little bit. It's kind of like, you know, when you take jeans out of the dryer and they're like really, really snug, but after you wear them for a day, they're like perfect, fit like a glove, like all of that sort of thing. So you can kind of expect the same sort of reaction to your garment with a cotton linen that you're treating in the washer and dryer. So this is a bottom up garment with a lace panel detail, and I'll kind of bring this up here so you can see it. And apologies for this crease here. As I said, it is cotton and linen. I had it folded up, so it has a crease in it right now. But you can see the really lovely lace detail. This is a really deep V of lace at the front. And then there's also a small lace triangle here at the back. And it just has a drop shoulder construction with a slim sleeve. And I did do a slight modification on this. I ended up just doing I-cord for the sleeves instead of the ribbing that was called for in the pattern. That was just kind of the look that I was going for. As opposed to a sweater look, I was kind of going for more of a top look. So I felt that an I-cord edge was a little bit more appropriate. So instead of knitting to like the length that I was supposed to knit to then begin the ribbing, I just knit to basically including the ribbing length and then added on that I-cord edge after. So I am super happy with this finished object here. I will go ahead and try it on for you. As I said, I couldn't be more pleased. It is really pretty. I am so excited to wear this come fall. Of course, now that we're in high summer, a long sleeve garment is like not something that I'm going to be wearing. I mean, I wear long sleeves inside, but it's like a cardigan that I can take off and on. I'm not really wearing like pullover long sleeve items in the summertime. So this will definitely get put like on a shelf until the fall when I can start wearing this. But it's definitely going to become a go-to piece this fall because like as soon as the weather starts to get a little cool, this is going to be something that I can wear just kind of like in place of a long sleeve t-shirt that I currently have, like a, you know, just a plain commercial knit t-shirt, that sort of thing, versus I have to wait until it's like really cold to wear a true sweater. So I'm really excited about having a cotton linen blend as a long sleeve item and seeing how that kind of will play into my wardrobe seasonality in terms of like total length of time that I can wear the piece and all of that. So I will try this on for you real quick here. All right, so this is my finished Oakhaven Tee on, and I'll stand up too so you can kind of see the full effect here. It definitely has a very nice and easy fit through the body. So I probably have about, the garment measures approximately 40 inches. My bust is about 37 inches, so I have 3 inches of positive ease. It definitely looks like more than 3 inches, but the kind of funny thing about how ease appears on the body is like, a garment is essentially a two-dimensional object. So the total width that it extends to is actually quite a bit wider than the width that your body extends to, because your body is more of like a circle. Well, not a circle, but like an oval, I guess, a kind of maybe flattened oval. But the total width that you kind of see of someone's body taking up space in a horizontal direction is significantly less than the flat measurement of the garment. So when you spread your arms out, you can kind of really see that flat dimension of the garment being quite a bit different than the horizontal dimension of the body, even though the total circumference is maybe, you know, not quite so dramatic there. And I'll give you a look at the sleeves too. So the sleeve just has a plain I-cord edge here. I followed the same decrease instructions as the pattern gave. And as you can see, it's a pretty slim fit for this sleeve. That is how the pattern is designed, is to have a slim sleeve. I typically like for a first layer sweater piece, so something that I'm going to put another cardigan over, I like to have a slimmer sleeve just so I can kind of enable that layering to happen. So a lot of times for my sweaters, if I'm going to be planning to wear them under something else, I want to keep that sleeve slim, so I just followed it exactly per the pattern. I will say that my arms are probably on the larger side of what a size chart says I would be based on my full bust circumference, but we all know that size charts are just like average numbers and no one's exactly going to line up with like the measurements listed on the size chart. So just for context, in terms of my body shape, I guess, my full bust and upper bust would kind of like, I guess, match what a size chart says that I would be. My waist would be quite a bit narrower, but my bicep would be quite a bit larger. So like a size or two up from what my full bust would suggest. And that's just thanks to being a swimmer for most of my life, lifting weights, and now also lifting a toddler regularly. Honestly, that's the biggest activity that I've done. I haven't swam or lifted weights in a little while, but I am regularly lifting a toddler, so my arms have kind of maintained that same shape from when I was working out quite a bit more and maintaining larger muscle mass in my arms. As I mentioned, there's also that tiny lace triangle at the back, and my hair is down so you can't really see it, so I'm just gonna flip it around, and this garment is actually designed to be reversible. So the neckline is the exact same shaping at the front and the back. It comes to the same depth, meaning that you can wear it either way depending on your preferences and that sort of thing. Of course, if you were to modify the pattern to add something like bust darts to accommodate a fuller bust than what I have, you know, it would no longer be reversible at that point because you'd have the bust darts on the side that you want to be the front side versus not having bust darts in the back. But if you don't need bust darts, this is definitely a fun pattern that you can reverse and wear both ways. All right, and here's what it looks like turned to the other side. So here you just kind of have a small lace triangle at the front. So I feel like this is a much more casual vibe compared to the very elegant vibe of the very deep V of the front of the garment, but I do wear it this way sometimes as well, just to, as I said, kind of have a more casual look. So I'll give you a little closer look of that lace. It is really pretty. I love it so much. I am so excited to have this piece finished and in my wardrobe. Again, as I said, not really going to get to wear it until fall or maybe late summer, but the knitting is done. I'm so pleased with how it turned out. I absolutely love the fabric and I really want so many tops in this yarn. It just feels like a super wonderful t-shirt, and like I just want a whole bunch of t-shirts made with this yarn in my wardrobe, and they would all be washer and dryer friendly, which is amazing because yes, wool has really great properties in terms of, you know, you're probably wearing a sweater multiple times before you're washing it thanks to those nice properties of wool. However, in the summertime, you're like kind of sweating a lot. You're also not usually wearing another garment underneath. So like a wintry sweater, you might be wearing another shirt underneath, and that kind of helps to protect your sweater. But in the summertime, I'm wearing like tank tops, t-shirts. These are all things that are definitely worn next to skin, and that does kind of limit how many times you can wear something before it definitely needs to go into the wash. And having something that's washer dryer friendly makes it just so much easier when I already have a lot of laundry on my plate and not always a lot of place to just lay things out to dry. I'm definitely kind of thinking about ways that I would be able to have more drying space. I haven't really figured out a good solution yet. I currently just have some blocking mats that I like stuff under a couch so that it's not really taking up floor space as I'm drying things. But I have so many hand knit tops because they're some of my favorite things to wear in the summer that like I end up with like a lot more tops than I have drying space for in a given week. So that's been a bit of a challenge for me. So if you have any ideas of how you stay on top of a lot of hand wash laundry, do you have any good compact lay flat to dry solutions that you really love? Let me know in the comments. One last thing before moving on to my next projects, I wanted to talk about yarn usage for this. So I ended up using 6 balls of oleander, and that's around a little over 1,200 yards. And I used like literally exactly 6 balls. Technically, I did dive into the 7th a little bit, but because of my false start with my other project where I was planning to make a Quotidian Tee and my gauge ended up not working out once I was like working a larger circumference, I had worked all the way through one ball and had started another one. So I was literally like on the I-cord of the sleeve and I needed to dive into my 7th ball for part of the I-cord. So I had gotten a few stitches into the I-cord when I realized, yes, I was definitely going to need to pull out that extra ball. So I completed that. But had I not used one of my balls to kind of work a row, I didn't frog that project. So that's all just kind of hanging out in its nice little loop from previous. If I hadn't started another ball with that project before deciding I need to put this on pause and see what's going on to make sure that it's not going to be a size that I don't want it to be, I would have had enough with just the 6 balls that I used. So that means I have 2 full balls left. I had purchased 8 initially, and one of those is in that loop of fabric that I've created, but I can always pull it out and use it for another project. And then I have basically a full ball that's just kind of hanging out in its original ball form as well. All right, so on to works in progress, and I'm realizing now that these are actually technically both new cast-ons. So the last time I recorded an actual podcast episode was like Memorial Day weekend. We're currently just after 4th of July weekend. So I have quite a few weeks in there where I've been working on my knitting projects. So both of these have been cast on in that intervening time. So starting with my first cast on, I cast this on at the beginning of June. And as I said, it's now just after 4th of July weekend. So it's been on the needles for approximately a month. I will say this looks basically like nothing because it's just kind of like rolled up stockinette bits. So I will show you my rolled up stockinette bits and then we're gonna make it look like something here in a minute. So this is my parsed tank pieces. So, oop, I just dropped one. So this is the piece that is currently on the needles here. And so this is the piece that I currently have on the needles. So this is part of a tank top. And I also have two other pieces here that basically just look like rolled up noodles. These are actually panels of a tank top it does not look like it. But this is my tank top pattern that is worked in 4 panels. So you have, 2 panels for the front, 2 panels for the back, and then you join them together with 3 needle bind off. So for these panels here, I haven't blocked them or anything. I haven't joined them. These are the front panels, and I'll spread it out a little bit so you can kind of see. It's probably just going to roll up on itself, but you can kind of see that, here's some armhole shaping and here's some neckline shaping on this side. But again, because I haven't blocked it, it literally looks like nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steam block these pieces. So I recommend in the pattern to either steam block. Steam blocking is usually going to be good enough for most fiber contents to kind of just like even things out and make sure it's not just like a rolled mess, to help you pick up the stitches and then do the 3 needle bind off to join your panels together. I will say, if you expect a lot of growth, especially lengthwise growth in your fiber content, I would absolutely recommend wet blocking, just to make sure that everything has loosened up as you're doing that join for the 3 needle bind off. So because these look like nothing, you can't really see what's going on here. We're going to head over to the blocking mats that I've set up over here and do a little steam block, and I will probably spend some time joining these today and come back later to share the more finished looking front panel than just these little wiggly pieces of fabric where you literally can't see anything. It's a V-neck tank top with A-line shaping, but you can't tell. So we're gonna steam block these pieces, join them later today. So I'm just gonna pop in that footage here and we're gonna act like it's magically happening right now. All right, so I have my panels and my blocking pins here. I like to use knit blockers because they have a bunch of pins on them, and it's a lot easier than using like individual pins, especially if you want to get straight lines and all of that. So I have 2 sets of these. They're so helpful. I really like them, and they're pretty much all I use for blocking. And I also have my iron over here. I don't know if you can see it though in the frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pin everything out to essentially what the measurements should be based on the schematic. And then I'm going to take my iron and steam out the pieces while they are pinned. So I'm going to first identify my center front V-neck position here and place one of my long pins through it. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side so I can line my pieces up and make sure that everything is symmetrical. All right, that should be good enough for now. I can always repin things to make sure that everything is symmetrical once I get things more, laid out and they're not rolling quite so much. So we'll just go ahead and get the bottom here. And I will say my table doesn't extend all the way over here. So these mats are just kind of floating at the bottom, which makes it not necessarily the easiest to pin into, but that's okay. All right, we've gotten those center front edges essentially pinned out. It's not perfect, but that's okay. We're not going for perfection on this steam block. We're just going for more usable than it currently is. So now I'm going to take my tape measure to help me pin out the outside here. So basically I'm going to be targeting 1/4 of the total circumference for each of these pieces here. So we're going for about 11.5 inches at the bottom here. And then for the top, as I said, 36 inches is my bust circumference target. So half of that is 18 and half of that is 9. So that's where we're going to be pinning out to for each of these sides here. All right, so we should be getting to approximately 9 inches here. So we'll just go ahead and get that 11.5 measurement at the center front and pull it out at the side. And then in the middle, we can just kind of, pull things out, grab a pin, and that should be good enough for now. And as you can see, this is like super rippled here. So that's the expected result when you're working this integrated I-cord trim along the edges. It's not until you block that the fabric can kind of relax and resolve these ripples. So don't be alarmed if you have rippling when you're working an integrated I-cord edge. This will definitely smooth out. All right, and then I'm going to do a quick check of armhole depth to make sure that I think I'm a little bit over there. So we're just going to let that come down just a touch. All right, so now we have a nice view of what this silhouette is actually supposed to look like on the flat here. Of course, this isn't perfect. I'm just doing a quick steam block here, but with that steam, the panels should release into approximately this shape. So let's go ahead and get that ironed. We're just gonna use the steam setting and steam the pieces to get that width that we need. So I have my iron here, and the iron's probably gonna be a little bit loud because of the steam, but I have it on the wool setting, and I'm just gonna hover it over about an inch. I'm just kind of patting it into shape while there's still some heat and steam in the fabric to get things to kind of align the way that I want them to. And then we'll give it another couple of minutes, just kind of hang out here with that steam cooling down in the fabric, and then unpin it. So this has been pinned out for a little while, so I'm going to take the pins out. And we're still definitely seeing a little bit of curling here, especially since we didn't do a wet block, just a steam block, but it is laying so much flatter than it was previously. And once we join these two panels together at the center front, of course, that's going to help this lay flat as well. So much nicer than things were before with everything just rolling up into a long tube. So I'll just get these joined together with picking-up stitches at each of the center front edges here and joining them together with a 3-needle bind off to actually have a panel of a tank top here. I am back after a steam block and picking up stitches and joining my panels with a 3-needle bind off. So things look quite a bit different now. So here is what my finished tank panel looks like. This will be probably the front, though I'm doing a V-neck for both the front and the back for this iteration of Parsed tank, and it is so drapey. So this is a milk fiber and merino blend. This blend is discontinued. I actually am not sure if this dyer is dyeing anymore, but this is definitely a really lovely fiber content for a tank top. My back panel is going to be mostly merino, so I will definitely be dealing with some difference in drape between the panels that I'm working on. But I'm really excited with how this looks here, how drapey it is. I feel like it's going to work really nicely with the A-line modification that I did for this top. So I will take it off the little hanger that I have here and lay it on myself so I can try it on. And you can see what it looks like sort of on a body, not really, but you know. All right, so I kind of have it on here and you can see that slip stitch detail in the middle. And I, of course, haven't woven in any of the ends here, but it'll anchor to my bust here. And as you can see, there's like a little bit of floatiness at the hem. So that's kind of going to be what this top looks like when I eventually, you know, knit the other panels and get everything joined together. I think it's going to be really, really nice. So again, this is Parsed tank. This is a new design that I'm working on. It's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks, and honestly, I may end up pushing the release date. I was initially planning to release it on the 18th, which is like next Friday, I believe. I ended up having a work travel trip put on my calendar like the week after release, so like during that kind of initial period. So I feel like that is not necessarily the best time to release a pattern when I kind of have a lot of stuff going on in my life otherwise. So I think I'm going to delay it just to give myself a little bit more time and energy to actually devote to the release. That being said, release date is imminent here in the next couple of weeks. So it'll either be, like next week or 2 weeks after that. The preview knit is well underway. I've gotten a ton of really great feedback. I actually ended up adding shaping tables into this pattern. So I haven't really shared yet about the details of this design today. So this is Parsed tank. It is a top-down tank top with a bunch of options. So this is the V neckline here. It also comes with instructions for a scoop neck and a square neck. And there are also different body fit options. So there's a straight body. I'm working the A-line body here. And there's also a fitted body. And because it's worked top-down with all of those different neckline options, I have the instructions written as at the same time instructions, where you kind of have your neckline stuff going on in one set of instructions and you have your armhole stuff going on in your other set of instructions, and you're just referring to where you should start each set of instructions at, like the anchor point that it tells you to begin those instructions. And in the preview knit, some of the knitters were a little bit less familiar with working at the same time instructions, or finding that it was a little bit overwhelming to figure out how to combine things. Once you are really familiar with how at the same time instructions work, and you can kind of like take the disparate pieces of information and be like, oh, this is how things fit together, it can be really challenging to really see how things are supposed to work. So I ended up creating shaping tables for this pattern, and basically that's a row by row checklist that visually shows what you're supposed to be doing on each row. So the table has several columns, and each column provides a little bit of different information. So there's like a row number column just to be like, this is row 1, this is row 2. And then there's a neckline shaping column and an armhole shaping column, a stitch count column, so you can keep track of exactly how many stitches are going to be on the needles regardless of which neckline option you're making, and then also how many slip stitches there are going to be at the edges at both the armhole and the neckline, because those are a really good way to count how far in you are in the pattern without needing to count every single row, because the slip stitch would be 2 rows. So it just kind of makes it a little bit faster to count where you are and how far you've made it in the pattern. So in the shaping columns for the neckline and the armholes, there's an X on the rows where you'll need to work shaping. So all you have to do is look at the row that you're on and see, is there an X in the neckline? Is there an X in the armhole? And then if there's an X there, you'll work the shaping at that location. If there's not an X there, you're just working even on that side of the garment. So it really helps you to be able to see how the shaping fits together. There was already a tip in the pattern to make a checklist to kind of help manage those at the same time instructions, but I decided to just go ahead and do the work for you, because it does kind of take some time to do all of that and put all of the pieces together. And it did take me several hours to do it for all of the sizes across all of the neckline options, but I mean, it's totally worthwhile to take that extra time to do it to make the experience easier for you. So back to my project here though, as I said, I am working a V-neck option with A-line shaping. This is the size 36, so it'll have about an inch of negative ease at my full bust and quite a bit of positive ease at my hip. Since, as I said, I work the A-line option, which adds some nice room at the hip here, and I have my front panels done, and I have just gotten started on working my back panels. So this is the first back panel here. I have just completed my V-neck shaping and my underarm shaping here, and I'm just kind of going on the body at this stage. I did my first A-line increase as well, so I'm just kind of continuing in the body, working increases every so often to get my A-line shaping, and then I'm going to work another of these, but it's mirrored. The pattern actually specifies those mirrored instructions. You don't have to mirror them yourself. And then I will have a finished top here. So I've already knit 3 other iterations of Parsed tank. I am not necessarily planning to use this for like pattern photo imagery or like the primary pattern photo imagery. This is really just a personal project to work through pretty yarn. So I had shared about these yarn details in my spring and summer knitting plans video, where I had mentioned that I've had both of these yarns. These are different yarns, by the way. You can kind of see here, this one's a little bit more chartreuse, this one's more gold. And I'd had these yarns in my stash for like a decade plus at this point. I just couldn't really see myself using these skeins otherwise. I used to knit a lot of single skein projects like shawlettes and that sort of thing, but my knitting tastes have just kind of shifted over time. I mean, it's been a a decade since I purchased these, so one would expect my taste to shift over 10 years. And what's really bringing me joy these days is garment knitting and making pieces that I love to wear and fit into my wardrobe really well. So I couldn't really make like a full garment out of these single skeins, so I was like, why don't I just make half of my garment in one and half of my garment in the other? So that is one nice thing about a garment in panels. You can do fun color blocking and get two different looks in one. If you're doing like front in one, back in another, you could also just do like one pop panel if you had a smaller quantity of a yarn that you were just kind of looking to get through. So it definitely gives you the opportunity to play with yarns that you already have in your stash, which is what I am doing here, and I am definitely enjoying it. Something that I'm a little apprehensive about is that these are very different fiber contents. So this is a milk fiber and merino blend, but it's like mostly milk fiber, which is essentially a rayon. And this one is mostly merino and I think maybe a little bit of yak. So this one is incredibly like drapey and fluid, and this one has a lot more structure to it. That being said, these are like, I do have one at the front and one at the back, so I'm just going to need to be careful at the side seam joins to make sure that the kind of tension along the side seam isn't causing one side to like cinch up or anything like that. So I will just, you know, potentially need to do some of the joins twice instead of once. Here in this join, you know, it's the same fabric or same yarn on both sides, so it's like pretty consistent. That being said, the join seam is a 3 needle bind off, and there's like not much give in a 3 needle bind off. And if you compare it to the fabric like directly next to it, you totally can stretch that. However, when you have it on and it's just kind of like sitting there, you're not necessarily like utilizing the stretch of the garment at that center front point. So it shouldn't really have a ton of impact there once you're just wearing it. But if you are making this top in a fiber content that has a lot of lengthwise stretch to it, like especially after blocking, or maybe it just happens to grow as you're wearing it, you may wish to alter the 3 needle bind off technique to do something a little bit more stretchy. So something you could consider doing instead of just a regular 3 needle bind off, adding in a yarn over as you're working the bind off to help provide some like extra yarn and extra stretch within that seam. Again, not necessarily a need for most fiber contents, but could be potentially useful in some cases, depending on what yarn you're choosing to knit this in. So I'm expecting the rest of this to go pretty quickly. This panel I cast on just a couple of days ago, and I'm already, you know, in the body. The upper body definitely goes really, really fast because you're starting with like a really narrow strap here, and then, you know, you do get to the body, but it's still only like a quarter of the total circumference. So it feels like you're making progress so fast in comparison to something that's like a total body circumference. So that is kind of fun, and I will work through this one, work through the next panel, and hopefully by the next podcast, I will have this complete. And also possibly by the next podcast, the pattern may be out by then. You can always sign up for my newsletter list to know exactly when that pattern is going to be released. I'll send out an email on release day along with a discount code, so be sure to sign up there if you don't want to miss it. On to my last work in progress. I just cast this on a few days ago, so I'm not very far in yet, but this is the start of a Ridgeview Tee regraded into fingering weight yarn. So Ridgeview Tee is a pattern I designed a few years ago in 2020. It's designed for DK weight yarn, and I wanted to make like a lighter weight version of it, since for a DK weight tee, it kind of limits how often you can wear it. It's definitely like a really good spring and fall piece, but it's not really as good for summer. I definitely can wear it if I'm just going to be inside all day, but I'm not usually gravitating towards that as much when it's super hot outside. Sometimes it's fine if I'm going to be like in the shade or only briefly outside, that sort of thing. But I really wanted to make a fingering weight version for more like year-round kind of wear. So that is what I'm doing here. And I am using Purl Soho Oleander again. And basically I cast this on as soon as I had finished up my Oakhaven Tee in Oleander, because I was like, okay, I definitely need an actual short sleeve t-shirt in this yarn. So let's go ahead and make this my next project. So I had swatched for it a little while ago, and here's my swatch. And I think it's really interesting looking at the swatch fabric versus the on the needles fabric. So this swatch, I again machine washed and machine dried. And I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about Oakhaven Tee, that things shrink up a little bit after washing and drying with this yarn. And what's really interesting is that the gauge definitely does like shrink a little bit, but it's not an overwhelming amount of shrinkage, but everything just like evens out so nicely. Things look kind of like, I don't know, a little loosey-goosey and wobbly before hitting it with a washer and dryer, and afterwards it's like really nice and crisp. So I'll show both of these next to each other so you can see the difference in the fabric and how much more crisp this one looks, especially in terms of stitch definition compared to what I have on the needles here. So I'm standing behind it so you aren't getting that backlight through, since that can kind of impact how you see the fabric. So this is that swatch and this is my fabric on the needles here. And you can really see just how much more nice this fabric looks compared to this. This kind of looks, as I said, a little loosey-goosey, and this looks nice and tidy. So there's really a big difference in that finished fabric before hitting it with a washer and dryer. So I have not tried just like washing and blocking without also putting it in the dryer. So just like hand wash, lay flat to dry like I typically do with my hand knits. So I don't know if you'll also get a similar result without putting it through the dryer, but it is kind of nice to just be able to throw things in the washer and dryer and have it be part of regular laundry, as opposed to needing to find the space to lay things out flat to dry and all of that. So I'm curious if you've also worked with this yarn, if you have had a similar experience when you've just hand washed, laid flat to dry, and getting the final fabric just being more crisp compared to what it is just straight off the needles. I would be interested to know, but again, I'm planning to just washer dryer this tee and anything that I plan to make in this yarn. I honestly need to buy more of this because it is such a lovely finished fabric. It definitely does stress my hands a little bit. I do kind of have to take breaks or work with something with a little bit more elasticity in between working on this project, just to make sure I'm not stressing out my hands. But that being said, it hasn't been like an unpleasant experience to work with. It's just something I need to take breaks with, and definitely has a different experience than working with wool. So that is where I am on my Ridgeview tee. Not very far in. I think I may be 4 or 5 inches into the back panel here. I'm going to do the whole back panel because I had to do the least amount of math to start the back panel. So I just took the measurement that I needed my back panel to be and kind of converted it to my new gauge and made sure that the stitch pattern fit in with the stitch count that I was going to use. So with this pattern, it is just a broken rib pattern. So a multiple of 2+1, but because on the front side you have that kind of V garter detail, you have to have the 2+1 on each side. So that center is a garter column of the broken rib as opposed to a stockinette column of the broken rib. So that's the only consideration. I had to make sure that the stitch count was going to work with that pattern versus, you know, ending up with the stockinette column in the middle. So that is what I did here to just, you know, get that initial cast on number. And I'm just gonna, you know, work to the underarm, and everything else I should essentially be able to do with measurements, except for figuring out the neck width. So I'll have to do a little bit more math for the neck width. And then once I've done all of that and kind of have my outer perimeter dimensions, then I can do a little bit more math to determine, okay, how much am I going to need to shape that V that does kind of line up with the neck width calculation though. But I'm still a little ways away from that, and I'm going to ignore doing the math for as long as I can on this because I'm just kind of doing the math here as a personal project. I'm not currently planning to make this into a pattern or anything with a light version. I am just doing the math for my size because I want this t-shirt in a lighter weight. Maybe down the line I will take that on as a project to officially get a lighter weight version into a true pattern format. But for now, this is just a personal project. And right now I have a lot of other things on my plate to get into patterns, like the double V tee that I finished a couple of months ago and the rock mill cardigan that I finished many months ago at this point. Those are my current plans for the rest of the year in terms of pattern releases, or at least garment pattern releases. So my plate is kind of full with those. So maybe I'll take that on next year. But for now, this is just going to be a personal project for a t-shirt that I want to wear this summer. So that's what this one is going to be, and I'm excited to keep working on it. Thank you for joining me today as I chatted about my current knitting projects. I am excited about all of these, and I'm also thinking about what I want to work on next. I had quite a few things on my spring and summer knitting plans that I haven't gotten to yet, so I really need to think about what I want to cast on next, since I just have these 2 projects currently on the needles. Usually I'll have, 2 to 4 going on at one time, so I feel like I need to cast on at least one more, maybe just like a plain stockinette something. I don't know. We'll figure out what we're casting on next, but next time I'm hoping to have at least 1 finished object. Maybe if I'm really fast, I could have 2 finished objects and something new to cast on as well. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. It just helps my channel be found by other knitters who would enjoy it as much as you. And if you'd like to find me on other platforms, you can always find me as Carrie Knits on Ravelry and Instagram. I'll see you next time.